Greetings all, welcome to another session here of Tuesday Talks. Today we're going to be looking at evaluating and using tests and assessments when you're teaching students listening and speaking. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you may want to do, some helpful tips, as well as some procedures that you ought to have in place. The most important of which is to have some type of data collection, some type of process where you can assess and collect the assessment procedures. So you're going to be giving them tests, a variety of different types of tests, whether they're summative or formative, whether it's just a checklist or it's a more formal type of a test. Regardless of what you're doing, you should have some form of assessment measure so that you can block and see what's going on. So I would recommend that you establish a data collection and analysis system. It can be pen and paper. It can be a pencil and a ledger where you're monitoring what they're doing as they go through the process. Or it can be digital, which is something that I would recommend more. It's interesting, Nation, which is one of the textbooks that we're using here to do this, Nation talks about having a monitoring system, and yet in some of his own books on speed reading, for example, the monitoring system is paper and pencil. It's not digital. The advantages of doing a digital-based system, obviously, is that you're able to analyze it more in-depthly and you analyze it in less intuitive ways. So that was going to be the better way there. In any event, have some kind of a checklist. If you've got 15 tests that you're doing throughout the system, you can analyze things. If you're doing before, mid, and after type of tests, and you have it on a list, you'll be able to do that. You're also going to be able to set up a checklist so that students know what's going on as they're going through the process. And they can do their own checking of this material. They can do a self-check. That way they can have a little more control over what they're learning. They're going to have more ownership. Ownership is going to imply that they're going to be more motivated because they have some control. When skills are mastered, you cross them off the list. When skills are mastered, you let them know, hey, we're done with this and we're moving forward. Oftentimes, simply having a checklist is a motivating factor because students see the progress that they're making, that they're moving toward a goal, and it's generally a stepwise progression. It's not big jumps, but they're being able to see what that is. It's an excellent motivator. I also recommend, regardless of what you're doing, that you perform regular checks, that it becomes a habit. That just like when someone's doing sports, you know, they have runs every day, they have drills every day, they have competitions every day while they're practicing. Same type of thing that you should be doing with regard to listening and speaking. And again, digital options are going to be better because of the advantages of analysis through a digital system. Also availability and accessibility. Let's move on. Testing listening. One of the first things that you want to be required for, and actually this is for anything, you should be looking at reliability and validity regardless when you're dealing with an assessment. You need to make sure that what you're doing is reliable, that it's actually testing what it ought to be testing, and that it's valid, okay? That it measures what it's intended to measure. All right, reliability. Listening tests are more reliable if they are recorded tests. Now, reliability actually deals with the whole concept of offering this test multiple times will yield the same result or a similar result. Offering this test to a similar group is going to yield the same type of result. So that's what reliability is. Therefore, you're going to have a more reliable test if they're recorded. Even if it's a live event that you're going to test them on, if it's recorded, they'll be able to listen to it again, and you're not changing anything within the actual listening test because it's recorded. It's also going to be more reliable if there are multiple attempts to measure listening. In other words, getting one snapshot of their listening abilities is going to be less reliable than if you have multiple tests, and that way you can do a comparison of them. You know, it may be that they were tired one day or sick or distracted, and you're not going to get an accurate picture. Getting multiple pictures of their ability is going to be a better type, a more reliable type of measurement. It's also good if students know what the format is. One reason why you often have students get a pre-test before they go take the TOEFL test or the TOEIC test. You know, they want to learn what this process is so they're not surprised when they go through the process and do more badly than they would have more badly. Anyway, so let them know what the format is. Give them that pre-test if possible. Anyway, that's reliability. Validity doesn't measure what it's intended to. And there are two pieces here that you want to remember. One is face validity, and that's, does it appear to actually measure what it's intended to. I'm always reminded of the story of people who were doing research on C testing. And a C test is a special type of cloze test that measures your language ability, but it very much looks like a spelling test. And there were a lot of people who were subjects in the research who said this test is not reliable because it's merely a spelling test. It didn't have face validity. It didn't appear to test what it was actually testing, when in actuality the test was extremely valid. It did test what it was intended to. It was an accurate measure of what that student's ability, language ability was, but it didn't have face validity. That's face validity. It didn't appear to test what it was. Content validity, does the content match up with the skills that are being taught? So you're giving a test, and you're testing to see if they understand a specific phoneme or specific vocabulary, or whether they can, get the main idea, get the gist out of a story type of thing. There are different types of tests that you do. And does the test that you're offering actually match up with the test? Does the test element actually match up with the elements that they were studying? That's content validity. With regard to testing, you always have to look at practicality. As you all probably know, I'm an open sourcer and I like things to be cheap, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're easy, which means they may not be practical. So with regard to creating tests or using tests, you need to look at a number of things. One of them is money. Is the test too expensive, or is it not is it within your range? And that's an issue that you're going to have to look at. How much time is going to be required to set up the test? Maybe the test is free, but it takes hours to set up. Now it's no longer practical again. How much work does it take to set up the test? Maybe it's not just time, but the effort that you need to put the test together. And then when the test is put together, the ease of use. How easy it is to use the test. And finally, washback. Okay, and you administer the test and you can get a score back of 55, but how is that going to help the learner improve his skills? How is that going to help the teacher identify what the weaknesses are? So if there isn't any good washback from the test, then you may not want to use it as well. There are a number of factors that you want to look at. Some type of listening tests include dictation, and I'm amazed that dictation is such a good measure of listening, and you can do dictation for short term, for long term. You can have it live, you can have it recorded, but it's an excellent way for students to practice their listening skills. You can do something like information transfer, and these are not just tests for a formal setting, but you could actually have a test where you're just giving partial information and somebody else has to get that information. You can do a cloze, and you'll know what a cloze is. You can have true, false with an opinion. You can do things like TPR. All different types of listening assessments that you can apply to your students to ensure that they actually have learned the objectives that you want them to have. With regard to testing speaking, one of the best ways to do this is with interviews. And obviously you need to have certain guidelines when you're doing an interview so that you're actually testing measurable elements, and it's probably good to have a checklist so they can check off, yes, they can do this or they can do that. Some people like to do group oral exams where people are asking each other questions, people are interacting with each other, and you can score elements off of that. Depending on the group, though, it may be a little more cautious because there are some people who function less successfully in a group, and others are more aggressive, and so they're going to do more within that group. Fun activity is called describe and draw, where one person is sitting here and the other person is facing me, and they can see behind me on the wall, they can see some image that I can't see, and they're trying to describe that, and I'm trying to redraw it. I'm trying to duplicate the drawing, describe and draw. You've got conversational cloze, where you listen to a conversation, and I can read part of the conversation, but there are words missing. I have to fill in those words. Multiple choice speaking tests, imitations, where they have to mimic somebody, and then role playing. Many different ways that you can do speaking types of tests. And that's all I have for this whole little blip here on monitoring and testing student progress. To be honest, there are many other types of ideas that are out there with regard to monitoring and testing. if you're interested in doing more of those, I do suggest you do some research. I know that if you've done any work with hot potatoes, it's a great way to create cloze activities. And Hot Potatoes is a very nice little program. It's freeware. You can download it, and very quickly you can create cloze activities. And when you're creating cloze activities, obviously there are a number of procedures that you need to be aware of as far as how to make them and how to make sure that they're reliable before you give them. But this is a great piece of software you can use. If you go to YouTube, you can see there are a number of videos here related to hot potatoes and how to use them. But this would be an excellent way for you to create materials so that you can use them when you're doing listening and speaking assessments. And that's all I have for now. If you do have any questions, you can certainly give me a holler, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye now.